I'm Patricia, and this is Investigating Vegan Life with Patricia Kathleen. This series features interviews and conversations I conduct with experts from food and fashion to tech and agriculture, from medicine and science to health and humanitarian arenas. Our inquiry is an effort to examine the variety of industries and lifestyle tenets in the world of vegan life. To that end, we will cover topics that have revealed themselves as common and integral when exploring veganism. The dialogue captured here is part of our ongoing effort to host transparent and honest rhetoric for those of you who, like myself, find great value in hearing the expertise and opinions of individuals who have dedicated their work and lives to their ideals. You can find information about myself and my podcast at patriciakathleen.com. Welcome to Investigating Vegan Life. Now let's start the conversation. Hi everyone, and welcome back. I'm your host Patricia, and today I'm excited to be talking with Elena Theis. She is the creator of #VeganVentures. It is a vegan travel blog. You can discover more about it and Elena herself on www.vegan-ventures.com. Welcome, Elena.
Welcome. Hello.
Excited to unpack everything that you're doing. You've written a couple of books as well that I'll kind of try to pull into the threads in the conversation regarding the rhetoric of #VeganVentures. For everyone listening who's perhaps new to this podcast and vodcast, I will offer a quick roadmap of the trajectory in which we'll base our inquiry out of. And then I'll also give you a quick bio on Elena before I start asking her our questions. So the roadmap for today's podcast, we'll look at unpacking Elena's academic and professional background, and then we'll also look at her vegan story as it's interwoven or not within that previous inquiry. And then we'll look at the logistics around Vegan Ventures, unpacking that, the who, what, when, where, why, how, when it was founded, all of those good things. And then we'll look at the ethos of that site, its intention, Elena's intention for the future with it, the goals, the audience that she's approaching and speaking to, and the efforts that she hopes to make with it. And then we'll wrap everything up with advice or future work that Elena seeks to endeavor regarding all of her work. So as promised, a quick short bio on Elena before I start asking her my questions. Born and raised in Germany, Elena traveled the world extensively before she decided to settle in Berlin. She left a successful career in online marketing and went on a trip to Hawaii in 2013 that changed her life for good. And marked the beginning of her vegan journey. Today, she is dedicated to promoting plant-based and cruelty-free living around the globe as a vegan writer, artist, and coach. Elena is the creator of #VeganVentures, a plant-based, around-the-world vegan travel blog, which also features occasional recipes. As a vegan ambassador, she shares her lifestyle and recommendations on social media, as well as on the vegan platform A Billion Veg, which donates $1 for each review to animal sanctuaries and cruelty-free products. Elena holds an MA in Mass Communication and Media Arts from Southern Illinois University, a Coaching for Transformation certification from the Leadership That Works, and is a licensed realtor in Germany. She's the author of several books, including Shampoo Thoughts on Happiness and #Anasha. This is going to test my German, Die Reis Benit. I probably butchered that, which is soon to be published in English as #Anasha, The Journey Begins. That's ANASH, The Journey Begins. So, Elena, I'm excited to crawl through. I have read your original, one of your several books, Shampoo Thoughts on Happiness, and I'm excited to kind of climb through that with you, as well as what you're doing with #VeganVentures. But before we get to that, I'm hoping you can draw kind of a platform or a description of your academic background and early professional life that brought you to the point of launching Vegan Ventures.
Sure, I'll be happy to. So yeah, as you mentioned, I got a master's degree in mass communication from Southern Illinois back in, 2005, I believe it was. And after decided to move back to Germany to be closer to family, and started working for a really small advertising agency. Like one of those things, you're out of college, you get the first job that you get. And that's how it went. And one day, however, a Google recruiter found me and offered me to work for Google. So back in the day, I didn't think about it too long, and I accepted the job, and I moved to Dublin and started working in online marketing for Google. And but realized quickly I'm not the kind of person that's going to be very happy in a big corporation. So I left that job, moved back to Germany, and worked for what was at the time Germany's biggest social network. That was before Facebook took over the world, actually.
Right.
We're the biggest platform, and I headed the sales department, sales and partnerships department there. Um, yes, I spent pretty much most of my traditional professional life in online marketing and sales to some extent. Um, yeah, and I also at some point realized this can't be it. It was a fun journey, an interesting journey, but I came to the point where everything I was doing, it seemed to be missing something. I realized I want to make a difference in this world with this lifetime that I have. So a process started that took several years actually, but
Yeah.
it started with a thought, with this wish of, doing something meaningful for the world. So I started venturing out and got a couple of certifications about different things, and finally decided to leave that corporate world and venture out on my own.
So what do you cite as some of the impetus? It sounds like it was a journey, the coaching for transformation certification and things like that kind of coming into play. And your book, Shampoo Thoughts on Happiness, kind of starts to climb through, a lot of the main axioms or mantras, if you will, of kind of this idea that I think has shaped a lot of what you're doing with your future endeavors following that. But you talk about mindfulness and frustration. There's, you have a period underneath, a description underneath that where you stayed, you were unemployed and you were telling people that it was your intention to stay that way. It sounds like you kind of crawled through this journey slowly, but do you have any specific key point in your life that pushed you towards it, or was it mere unhappiness that made you desire something more? Was there ever any point that you were introduced to something or an incident that happened that started the journey? And was this when you started thinking about a vegan life?
To the first part, yes and no. I mean, there was underlying unhappiness, but I wasn't aware of that. The real trigger, the major event that triggered this quest for something more was actually I had a miscarriage in 2008. It wasn't a planned pregnancy, but I had just arranged myself, my life, my ideas around the thought of having a baby,
Yeah.
and then I had a miscarriage. So my entire life changed completely within a couple of weeks twice.
Hmm.
First in one direction, then in the other. And that for me was really like my whole foundation shattered. Everything that had mattered before just didn't matter anymore. I mean, I had a successful career. I was making a lot of money. I had all the glory, fancy names on my resume, but I just didn't care anymore. Nothing mattered.
Yeah.
So that was really the starting point, I would say,
Uh,
back in the day. And but then it still took a couple of years actually. So like I said, this happened in 2008, late 2008, and it wasn't until 2012, I believe, that I left my last corporate job. But in the meantime, I did a whole lot of other things. So for example, I spent some time at a Buddhist monastery, which I would describe definitely as another milestone. um, I Over the years I spent 2, 3 retreats there, but the very first time being there and getting in touch with Buddhist philosophies,
mm-hmm.
which back then were completely new to me. I mean, I knew nothing about all that mindfulness and that. I was busy being busy, and so I would say those two were the major milestones, and everything from there really happened. I never, your second question, I never consciously decided to be vegan, but one day I was. And it was just this process that started with a dietary consultation, actually, with an Ayurvedic dietitian. And I have to tell you, I looked a lot different back then. I was 60 pounds heavier, one of the things. And I actually went to see her because I was struggling with allergies. And so looking at my Ayurvedic type, she just recommended to leave out certain foods. And I did, not completely, but I tried, I was experimenting. And I could tell, so mostly that was red meat and dairy at the time.
Yeah.
And I realized very quickly how much better I was feeling. And so for me, it's all interwoven. I didn't think about being vegan at the time, but once I started or I stopped consuming animal products or reduced them, at least at this point, I could see the connection not only to my body and my health, but also my mental state.
Yeah.
So, and this journey led me to a point where I just, first of all, my body wasn't craving any of these foods that I used to love before, but also how my mind, something was started. I started to question things and how, I can't lead this lifestyle on one hand, but not look at the entire picture. And for me, food, body, mind, and spirit, it's all one. So at one point, I realized I can't do this anymore. And suddenly I was vegan.
Yeah, after that path. I've spoken to, this series, this podcast endeavors to look at the vegan world from all angles, not one in particular. And it's interesting how all roads lead back to vegan. Maybe I've unearthed about, I'd say well over 30 so far in my 50 podcasts that I've done, reasons why. There's health, there's optimal mental clarity, there's spirituality, there's animal welfare, there's economy and ecology, there's environmentalism, there's accountability and sustainability, all sorts of things. But it all kind of leads back to people questioning all of the other arms of it as well. So if someone came at it from the environmental aspect, they eventually come back to describe having questioned the cruelty aspect and things like that. It doesn't really matter where you begin. Everyone ends up at the center with a lot of very similar ideas, which is unique because it's not true in a lot of ways of life, and certainly not in a lot of dietary, which a lot of people consider vegans to just be a dietary thing. And I think what's interesting about it is I titled the podcast this after doing research of realizing that it's truly a way of life for people after they've encountered it enough. And much like yourself, allergies and things like that. I don't think that people who are adults who don't suffer from allergies, I was one of them, understand how much mental fog accompanies them. Allergies from food, even, and from the environment. There's the description of just like a haziness, a constant like sleepiness. And when that's lifted along with the allergies, like you speak about this mental clarity that goes along with it, which I think sounds like a brilliant side effect. I'm curious, it sounds like everything was interwoven within this time period. You were experiencing this Ayurvedic help with the diet. Then you're going to, Buddhist retreats, you're studying this philosophy, and you wake up one day and you're vegan. Is that when you chose to write Shampoo Thoughts on happiness, or was it during that transition? Was it during that journey?
Actually, Shampoo Thoughts, the book was just published last year.
Oh,
the
okay.
stories I write about were a part of this journey.
Gotcha.
And actually, back then I started blogging. I started a blog which I called Mindful Vision, which it still exists, but I don't really use it anymore. But that's how it all started. I woke up one night, in the middle of the night, I remember, and I had to start this thing, and I started writing. So the idea for this book came last year on a trip, actually. And I started not just using the blog, a lot of the things I published on the blog first, but they've been edited and enhanced, but the foundation was really that blog. And then it's a continuation also of my first book, Anasha, Die Reise beginnt. You were close with that, by the way.
Thank you.
But it was really the idea of taking all these learnings, taking all my baby steps that I took at the time. I took so many steps in different directions. Sometimes I was walking circles. Sometimes I took one step ahead and three back, to use that and share it. And like, I have all this. And I mean, you read it, so you know it spans quite some time.
Yes.
Just little episodes, but that's how the shampoo thoughts came about. But really, as a light read of inspiration, sharing my own way, sharing my own doubts and thoughts and stumbling stones along the way.
Yeah, it talks a lot about core tenets that I think speak to a lot of things that vegan practitioners from all different realms kind of come into concept with. And I hadn't really thought about it until it was linked as part of your bio, but you talk about addiction to stress and things of that nature that, these moments of having to use, as you know, radical honesty in an effort to really analyze things we'd rather not look at, or we've spent up a lot of barriers. I think a lot of people would tell you, the majority of people I know would say that they don't like stress, and you unpack it as this, like, indeed you do, and you enable it, and you're quite addicted to it in one's life unless you're looking at it, because it's part of, I was too busy working to consider work, like all of these efforts, they kind of turn in on themselves, which I think is a lot of the vegan things as well. People talk about, I was too busy eating to consider my diet, things of that nature. I was too busy being addicted to food to realize why I was addicted, or to realize that it was killing me. So I want to climb into I want to know, so let's get the logistics for everyone listening out of the way. So when was #VeganVentures, the blog, launched? And did you take any funding? Did you have any co-founders? And what was the impetus for it? Like, what was the beginning phase of it?
It was born out of necessity, actually. The blog, as it is now, I would say, was launched sometime in 2016, maybe early 17. I can't even give you the exact date, because also, as everything in my life, I start something, I don't know where it's heading, and one day I see the result.
Yeah.
So Vegan Ventures was really started out of necessity. I mean, I went vegan in 2013, so it's been 7 years, and a lot has changed in the meantime. And I've always loved traveling. So when I first went vegan and I was traveling, I was on my own. I mean, you couldn't just go to the grocery store and pick up 5 different kinds of plant-based milk and vegan cheeses and whatnot that you can do now everywhere, at least in Germany. I mean, all the major grocery stores everywhere carry a good amount of vegan products.
Yeah.
Back in the day, not the case, let alone eating out when you're traveling. So a part of my travels for me was not just the travels that I enjoyed, but I also wanted to help other vegan travelers at the time, sharing, what I found out, sharing about local places, or sharing the best tips about how to go about something. So for example, I learned very quickly that you can't rely on really getting a vegan meal on an airplane, even if you ordered it.
Right.
Just little things, but it was really things I discovered along the way that I just wanted to share to make it easier for others. And also, in a second step, that was the first step, how it came about. In a second step, I just wanted to share my vegan life as an inspiration to show people you can do this. And this is not just munching on carrots and celery, and you don't stop living a decent, fun life because you go vegan. Just the opposite is the case. How much more very colorful, healthy, fun this can be. And that was really the second step that I still want to, still my aim until today.
Absolutely. So you kind of mix in everything. You said, you've got some recipes, you do this, you do that. What is your curation process like? How do you decide what makes it onto the blog? What's important enough to feed? Do you take audience, readership feedback? How do you do that?
A little bit of everything. So as I told you before, I'm kind of I'll just do it and then I see where it goes. But I had to be a little more considerate at some point. The recipes, for example, I wasn't planning on putting recipes on there. And there are not a whole lot up there yet. I still have a lot more to go on there, but this was, yeah, reader feedback,
Yeah, absolutely.
especially on Instagram, because I'm posting a lot of my food on Instagram that I make, and I'm making a lot of veganized German food as well. So this came from my German speaking following mostly. Like, oh, can you send me that recipe? And then I sent a first recipe, and then I sent a second recipe. Like, oh, that's a lot of work sending out each recipe by itself. Like, okay, I'll put it on the blog.
Yeah.
So this is reader feedback. I started doing little videos, promotional videos as well. And this also just happened because I happened to be in Greece, and I met a wonderful vegan chef with German roots. And funnily, his place is also called Roots, Foods and Cultures.
Nice.
And I loved his story. I loved his food. I loved his place and his vibe. And it's like, I need to share this with others. So I started making a little video to catch the vibe of the entire situation. So really, it evolves as I go along,
Yeah.
and I respond.
Speaking to that, I still think one of my great narratives that I like to draw vegans and non-vegans alike through is the story and chronicles of vegan cheese. And I don't know how, but the Greeks got it right, like fast and furious. Like 10 years ago, when vegan cheese over here was terrifying. Like you just didn't get near it. It didn't melt. It was horrible. It was filled with more preservatives than plastic, and the Greeks just came along and used olive oil. It was a genius thought. So I to that end, I kind of want to unpack, because you have this great finger on the pulse for German vegans. And I have to say, I have a lot of stereotypes that unpack when I start traveling as a vegan, because I think of Germany and I think of schnitzel, and like the very few things I can think of eating are like kraut or something like that, like very few items. But I want to kind of unpack with you how your perception of the vegan scene in Germany is, and how it's changed, if it has changed over the past 5 years.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. I mean, I live in Berlin, so this is not really a good example for the rest of Germany, because this is, I think, the vegan capital of at least Europe, if not more. I think we have now, I'm not quite sure, but I think we have in Berlin alone about 80 all vegan restaurants and cafes or stores.
Yeah.
So here, whatever you crave, if it's a vegan schnitzel, you'll have at least 2, 3 places to get your vegan schnitzel.
Yeah.
So Berlin, different story, but even the rest of Germany, major changes. So when I remember 2014, I was traveling throughout Germany, the southern area of Germany, mostly rural. So I was vegan already. It came to a point I didn't even bother asking for vegan options anymore.
Right.
It just didn't exist. Maybe they had something vegetarian, but it was surely stuffed with cheese and other things I wouldn't eat. So I went on a raw vegan diet for a while because I couldn't cook or prepare my own food at the time. So that's okay. But nowadays, I want to say, of course, you still see differences if you go to a bigger city, even if it's not Berlin, but let's say a bigger city, all of them have vegan restaurants by now. And unless it's a very, how can I say, old-fashioned place, I would say most places either have a vegan option on the menu or will be able to create something for you.
You can entertain
And
a conversation without getting angry. Like back in the day, I always say 5 years ago, when you told someone you were vegan, it was like a call to arms. They were immediately like offended. There was an immediate education, and perhaps a de-escalation of being, offensive to them. And I think now, at very least, people are willing to hear the word without like that reaction. At least in the States, is it the same over there? Can you kind of use the word vegan? And what is it in German? Is there a word for it?
it's almost the same. It's vegan.
Okay. So
Um,
do you think that people So if you were traveling through, let's say, South Germany, and you bopped into a little town, or even over towards like the Polish border, would, if you said that word, would in a delicatessen or a restaurant, would, do you think that people would know what it was?
Hard to say. Most, I mean, if you're in a very, very small town and let's say older people, your chances are getting slimmer. But overall, I would say overall, it's, people know what it means. I mean, not necessarily everything that it means. So I learned that very quickly that if you say, I'm vegan, I don't eat animal products, sometimes it needs more explanation than that. So I usually just run through the list, you know. So that means that I don't eat, and then I just blah, 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 blah. And then when they suggest something, I think about everything they could possibly put in there. And I double check and ask again. But overall, this people, I don't see this, what you mentioned, this, I think you said anger, something like that. It's more amazement, or so like, how can you live like that, like, oh my god, or why would you do that, like, um but it really has changed over the years, and it's much more accepted and known. um like I said, in the all the major supermarkets here in Germany, they have increased their vegan products by, I don't even know, a lot.
And I think that, well, I believe that where some of the anger that a lot of people may have experienced 5, 10 years ago is based out of veganism was introduced as this restrictive, almost cultish way of life, that a group of people lived who were kind of obsessed with the welfare of animals and militant and not carrying values and beliefs like the rest of us. And since that time period, at least in the United States, there's been so much media and propaganda and films and scientific studies that have come out and proven the benefits and the longevity, you know, and the disease reversing and health aspects of veganism, that I think a lot of people now don't necessarily attribute it to this militant way of life, but rather people who may be seeking health or may have allergies. It's just been attached to something else. And so I think that the anger portion of it has definitely dropped off. Though I will say that as a mother of 4 children, there's no faster way to get, you know, people kind of throwing up their arms with me than to suggest that my vegan child's coming to their child's birthday party. Even when I'm like, no, 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 they're good. They don't need to eat anything, that you don't worry about it. You know, there's this sense of difficulty. Whereas children who have any type of allergies, you know, I don't think that there's that same sense, at least not to their face, perhaps behind their backs. But this inclusiveness, I think, is starting to reach out. I like there. So Europe is tiny, but so different, you know, especially with the vegan culture. I visit Ireland a great deal, Dublin, and my husband's family is, you know, from there, and we travel all over. And Dublin did a good job over the past 10 years. They've had some really staunch, old, historical vegan restaurants that have been around for 20 years. And since that time period, the vibrancy has kind of come up. But I really see it as a product of, you had a few of the old guard, but it's the youth, it's generation, you know, it's the millennials, definitely, but Gen Z, who are actually coming at veganism, not necessarily from a health standpoint, because the youth tend to be healthy, but rather from an environmental and a responsibility standpoint that they all have. And it's very different from there when I go to Australia or somewhere else. The youth and the vegans there have they come at it from exercise and fitness. You know, there tends to be that influence over there. I'm wondering, where do you think the larger population of the vegan members of the community are in right now in Germany? Is it in the younger? Is it also spreading into the older? How does that work?
They're everywhere, of course, but I do think the younger generation is making a difference and bringing more awareness
Mm-hmm.
to veganism, and also, you know, tying in like environmental aspects. The older, I mean, this is by no means a general assessment, but from what I see or from the people that I know, I would say the older generation, most of them, not all of them, but a lot of them, did come to veganism because of health for health reasons. Um, and like with myself, that's the start. And then along the way, a lot of them open up like, oh, there are a million more reasons to be vegan. But this was the starting point. I see that with the older generation in general, but especially the young ones, environment, animal rights activism, all of that, I would say is probably the driving factor. Like the young folks who are willing to go out on the streets and do all the protesting and all that. Definitely. And I also think that from my experience, it's a lot more normal in the younger generation
Sure.
to be vegan.
Yeah, and they're going to grow up. So it's going to
Yeah.
be, it's going to be normalized one way or another. I'm wondering, with the COVID-19 pandemic and the set in, for you personally, obviously not on a political scale, but has there been conversation in Berlin that you've seen about returning to looking at food or sources of health? Not even, I don't get into the cause of COVID or anything like that, but it's returned a lot of people to a conversation about diet and what we are eating and what will keep immune systems healthy in a way like hasn't happened over the past 50 years. And I'm wondering in Germany if there has been a return to considering, even just like increasing the amount of vegetables or things that do kind of speak to the vegan lifestyle. Have you seen an increase in that with anyone personally or on the news or anything like that?
Personally, I'm trying to have these conversations because that's exactly my arguments. Like we do have an immune system.
Right.
It's made for things like that. I mean, I'm not saying that this is not real and people aren't suffering and dying. I do see that. Yet we do have an immune system. And for me, I have to say, I don't follow the news daily. I just don't. But from what has come to my attention, what I've seen, I'm not seeing that at all. It's more about, trying to, what can we do to go back to our weird way of
Right.
normal life that we had before.
Yeah.
So we're wearing masks, we're doing this, doing everything possible so we can go back to our routine behavior, which was the most convenient, and we don't have to look at it. Nobody's publicly, at least, I'm not saying nobody, but this is not the news that the majority of Germans hear about, like a discussion about, well, what can you do with your immune system? How can you boost it? All these things. And it's really, I find it very annoying because I'm trying to have this conversation, or at least have the conversation. Why don't we hear about this? I do trust in my immune system. I do. And so right now, and this is really a very sensitive topic because just this or last week, they found a huge outbreak in a slaughterhouse in Germany. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Did. Yeah. And I had wondered kind of what the local conversation was about around that.
So I just heard on the radio today as I was driving in my car, I just heard that apparently one major politician from one of the conservative parties said we need to reconsider our animal agriculture. I was like, huh. I didn't hear what he said in detail, just so I can only give you what I heard on the radio. But apparently for him, we need to go back to small slaughterhouses. Like, that's not the discussion we need to have. But at least, although this is not the discussion I want to have, but it's at least a step. And still, I mean, a lot of major outbreaks. I mean, from what I know, this has been the biggest in Germany in a slaughterhouse, but there have been major ones in other slaughterhouses before. And I can't believe that we're not having other discussions than how long do we need to wear a mask? How can we keep our kids out of school? Like, that's not the solution to the problem. That's just masking it with a mask.
Yeah, and as endurance wanes, I think the desire to stop questioning, the endurance to continue staying at home, the endurance to continue questioning, like it exhausts the mind. But I agree. And the cool thing about science and pandemics, if there ever were a cool thing, which there isn't, is that it doesn't let up just due to human exhaustion. So it will spike again if things aren't considered and changed. It won't let go until it's had its way, until we figured out a way through its way. So I agree with what you're saying. I'm wondering, it sounds like you've had a lot of interpersonal dialogue. You've wanted to have conversations with your public, with everyone around. And I'm wondering if that has changed your goals and what some of your goals are for hashtag vegan ventures, for the blog, for your investigative efforts. Will you continue traveling once travel restrictions are lifted, once there's an immunization to COVID? And if so, will it change your dialogue with the world? What are your future goals?
It kind of has, actually. I mean, I can't give you like an exact direction where I see this heading, but what I found is, I mean, I started this, as I said, more as an inspiration for others or sharing my knowledge. And I've come to the point where I really want to speak up for those who don't have a voice. I want to help this planet move in a plant-based direction. I don't know if I'm going to see this in my lifetime, but at least I want to say, be able to say at the end of it, I tried.
Yeah.
And so for me, this entire thing has been to be a lot more outspoken about that, and to also have the uncomfortable discussions, which it's not that I didn't have them before, but it wasn't really my focus, but to wake people up, to show them what's going on. And also, I mean, I was one of them. I mean, I ate meat for 33 years of my life. I not once questioned that really
Mm-hmm.
before, not seriously at least. So to to have these discussions, knowing I know where you're coming from, I know this is very uncomfortable, and I know this will maybe be a little challenge here and there, but we live in the year 2020. There is so much information out there. You literally, it's harder to close your eyes and not see or hear any of them
Yeah.
than it is to, as it was, let's say 20 years ago. You had to go out and find these pieces of information and all that.
Absolutely. I agree. I think you do.
It's out there. And there is not one ethical reason to keep doing what we're doing. Not for humanity, not for the animals, not for the planet. And there is no planet B. And we need all of us on this planet.
Well, and that just shows you the incredible attachment. The only thing I can equate it to is practicing breath work during meditation and things like that. When people tell me to control my breath, there is an innate, like almost automatic anxiety that creeps into the body without even realizing in the mind when you go to control that, because you're controlling your life source, right? You're controlling your air. You need it. And I feel like the same is true for food. When we go to question certain things about food, you are not just thinking about one aspect of your life that you might change. You're thinking about the love that your grandmother gave you. You're thinking about all of these things subconsciously, the way that you reward yourself, the way that you hide from things, the way that you get through a tough situation. All of these different things are very much so attached to food in every single person's life all over the world, from, South Africa to Antarctica. And so I think that analyzing it needs to come from, as you're saying, this place of compassion, that we get, that people who have gone through it and thought through it and gone through these testing things that we're very much so attached to for existence, and coming out saying it's fine to be a little bit nervous, but I think it's also proof that it is so clearly ingrained in just more than nutrition. It's more than just what we're eating to live, because there is no evidence on earth that says eating meat anymore is a good idea. There's just not, even for the sustaining of our civilization. And so the idea that people are still doing it, it's because it's so attached to other things that we fight wars over. And so I think that it's really great to come at it, as you say, with this very patient, like, I understand this is a little scary and I was where you were at, those types of things. I have yet to actually speak with someone who was born vegan. I will find them. Hopefully it's a her or a female identified or non-binary individual, because that's the company I like to keep. But I would love to find someone who was born and is a gold star vegan, never varied away, because I just haven't met one yet.
I have.
Ooh, good.
I unfortunately, I wish I could say I can put you in touch with her,
Hmm.
but I can't because one of the things that I do or used to do, I do vegan tours in Berlin, and one of my guests, which wasn't even on my vegan tour, it was a different tour that I did, but we started talking about veganism, and she told me she was born vegan.
Remarkable.
Her dad was vegan, and yeah, I was like, I'm jealous.
Interesting idea to have never even questioned it, and so I think it'll be fascinating. My children will be able to say they were born vegetarian. My youngest won't be able to remember not being vegan, but to be able to say you've never is an interesting idea, and to kind of crawl into that. And the majority of the rest of the vegans are walking around, needing to exhibit the compassion that one should have for having realized, the truth and things of that nature. We're slowly crawling into being out of time, but I wanted to ask you before I let you go, Elena, if you have like a top piece of advice for anybody who is listening, who is not vegan, but kind of analyzing it, listening to this podcast. We've had a lot of people write in saying, I really like the idea that you're coming at it. We've interviewed a whole bunch of doctors and, just as I've said, characters and experts from different parts of life. And you're coming at it from this traveling standpoint, from a very personal testimony. And I'm wondering if you have any piece of advice that you can offer anyone who's kind of listening just to educate and understand a little bit more about the vegan world.
Two things actually. One, I get that too. A lot of messages from people who are not vegan yet, but they see the benefits for whatever, like all the reasons mostly, and but they struggle. And for me, this has led me to think about offering some vegan coaching. Um, as you mentioned, I am a coach. I'm a certified coach. I never really before thought about going in the direction of vegan coaching, but doing exactly this, helping people along the way with their struggles. But that's a general approach. But overall, have compassion with yourself and take one step at a time. I mean, you don't have to be the perfect vegan overnight. Some people can do it, most people can't. And you don't have to. It's okay. Take the step that you can. Look at your life as it is right now and look at, okay, what's the first area I'm going to take on? What can I do? What can I change? How can I create new rituals, new things to reward myself? Um, Join vegan groups, like acquaint yourself with the lifestyle a little bit and then go step by step by step by step. And you'll always be at, you'll do it at your own pace, and eventually don't beat yourself up if you can't keep your goal that maybe you had in mind, turned out you couldn't reach it.
Yeah,
It takes time for most people, and have compassion with yourself as much as you do with the others and the animals and the planet.
I love that. That's perfect. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us all of your advice and your expertise today, Elena. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. For everyone listening, we've been speaking with Elena Theis. She's the creator of hashtag Vegan Ventures. You can find out more. It's www.vegan-ventures.com. And thank you for giving us your time today and having your thoughts with me. And until we speak again next time, remember to stay safe, eat well, and always bet on yourself. Sancha.